Hi, I'm Vincent.
And I'm Tom, and we're from Skillbard Studio.
And we're going to talk to you about two different ways that we try to inject a bit of a jazzy, improvisational feel into the music of the game Genesis Noir.
In the first part of our talk, we chatted with Jeremy and Evan from Feral Cat Den and talked about a very specific single musical interaction in the game.
And in the second half, we'll talk about how we left space for actual improvisation in the recorded music and how we worked with musicians to jazz it up a bit.
This whole kind of level, it takes us through No Man, the player character, kind of being taught the gift of music by this musician character that he meets.
Yep. The player begins, and No Man begins by making a bunch of mistakes musically, and then over the course of the game, or over the course of the interaction, the player starts leading the busker in the music, and then they eventually kind of come together and like as equals and perform a duet.
So this scene that we're kind of talking about, this is kind of the full coming together of the lessons that No Man has learned throughout this level. So Jeremy, did you have a kind of initial inspiration behind like what gave you the idea of making this interaction the way?
So, I mean, I've always enjoyed jazz music, and I was a jazz drummer all throughout school. So I really wanted to kind of bring that experience into a game, and I always felt like, you know, as a drummer, you're like responding to the other musicians in the band, and I kind of wanted to capture that kind of feeling of like having a conversation with music and like listening to what other people are saying with their instruments effectively.
And so the actual kind of musical implementation of this, I remember you talking about looking into kind of prior attempts.
Nothing. I mean, there was stuff that was like either just a toy by itself with no narrative, or super narrative and very little toy. I don't remember any specific interactions that come to mind, but I remember wanting to kind of have the best of both worlds, where there was a narrative reason for this toy existing, and then the toy itself. Because there's plenty of web interactions and like little flash toys where you can like just run up and down a scale and it plays along to a song. Sorry for the sound, but there's no reason for that really existing in a narrative world or context. So it's kind of nice to build that as one holistic kind of thing.
That music is crazy.
It's cool. It's very
Very New York.
It works very well, with this level that we're talking about that actually has a lot of those kind of sounds.
We could just put that background loop on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In your GDC talk, you kind of mentioned why you kind of looked into some methods of improvisation, like machine learning improvisation.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted it to be like originally. I wanted it to be smart, smarter than it is. And so I like immediately like, oh well, someone's got to be trying to solve this kind of a thing, because I know I've seen YouTube videos of like, oh, here's a little robot that plays marimba and like tries to follow along with a band. It always felt a little hokey, because I don't really think there's a good way of actually achieving that kind of stuff. At least yet. I don't know what they're doing now. But to me, it feels like the amount of time you spend trying to build a system like that you could just learn to improvise yourself in that same amount of time. So once I kind of ran through, I got all that stuff out of my system. I was like, okay, one, machine learning requires like a massive amount of data, so it wouldn't even fit in the game to begin with. And so I had to like figure out some kind of much simpler, stupider solution, I guess. Which is just literally playing what the snippets of what the player plays back to them, but moved around in both time and in pitch.
But it sounds really good, and I like that you kind of you came to this realization that it's a 5-minute scene in a game. You're not like doing a PhD thesis, and it just has to function to tell the story and work in the game, which I think it does brilliantly.
Yeah, I think that was the big realization, which I mean, I had that several times over the entire project. Anytime, I want to build a simulation of something, there's two directions you can go. You can either be super intense with it, or you can just make it work for the thing it needs to be used for, and that's it. And kind of achieving that kind of balance and coming up with a way of generating that simulation that's still enriching and deep enough, but without it being super shallow, is really fun to try and figure out.
Were there any design principles for Genesis Noir that you kind of applied to this interaction when you were first coming up with it?
Well, I think the main one was that we don't take anyone's toys away, which means that especially towards the end of the interaction, when it's just like a free-for-all duet kind of a thing, the player has to exit that system. So they have to like drag a train across the screen. And that's a slow process where where the music will fade out. So it cues the player that, okay, this is ending the interaction. If you continue going in this direction, then it will stop. So that kind of lets them know that, hey, this is how you continue if you want, but you don't have to. You can keep playing with this indefinitely. I think that was the main one.
Yeah, one of the challenges that we kind of set ourselves up for was that we didn't have any text that explains what the interaction is, or like a UI button that says, I'm done.
Yeah.
Take me to the next thing. So we wanted to emphasize discovery and exploration, so that, we try to come up with like a magical, intuitive way for the player to kind of like understand that this is going to be advancing them to the next part of the story. So we came up with this idea of the train city ambient sounds fading in while your music kind of fades out.
Cool. And so this whole, you mentioned kind of briefly just a bit earlier, the player is kind of playing over the changes as if they are a jazz musician. And could you just kind of go through a little bit about how we mapped that out and how we allowed that quite simple system to happen?
So that was all done through Fmod, which is our audio middleware toolkit that we use. And it lets us set markers in music events that get fired into Unreal, and then we can read those markers back as text. So the way we set it up was we had a root note and then just the intervals of whatever scale we're using. So it was like 1-1-2, 1-1-2, I think was what we ended up using, which I think is Lydian, some such. I'm not sure. It was something interesting, is whatever it was. But that allows us to both change.
I think for this piece, it was we just made it Mixolydian, and then it just went up a semitone, and then back again.
It allowed us to easily change the root note by just changing a single character at the beginning of the string if we wanted to, which kind of let you have flexibility in how you wrote the song and what chords you used and that kind of stuff. But it also allowed me to easily prototype, because I could just I used All Blues as the test song for all of the interaction, forever. Because I could just put my own scales in and use that. And then we just swap the song out and swap the notes out. And it worked just fine. So I think that was definitely an important thing with a lot of the interactions that we did, is that if it was musical, then I needed to have a test track to work with. And I guess one of the important things with All Blues is that it has that key note where, it goes, I don't know where it goes, but it goes into a super minor sound that kind of adds this big contrast and adds momentum to what the player's playing. Because if they're always using the same scale, then it can feel kind of boring.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to talk about in kind of next, is what we think we could do to improve this interaction, because we could just add like more scales and
Right.
like the player could.
So I actually added, if you're using controller, then every button on the controller does something to the sound, much like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask and stuff, where there's all these secret notes and like pitch bends and filter cutoffs and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I think just one button just raises everything a half tone, and the other button lowers it, and then there's another octave jump button, and like I think one of the trigger buttons does filter cutoff and delay, feedback amount.
Are you talking about what's currently in the game, or what?
Yeah.
Oh my god!
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Well, if you plug a controller in, then
I use a controller.
Then press all the
But I
buttons.
guess,
I've never played with a controller. I've always just been on mouse.
Yeah, we were all just making him
No,
under the assumption there was only one button.
no, it's I mean, it's secret. It's an Easter egg.
Not anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, I talked about it in this Steam announcement. I was like, hey, press buttons in this interaction now on your controller.
Oh, missed that.
Because, like, a lot of people wanted that. Like,
that was an update like 6 months ago.
Yeah. It was
An
ages ago.
update,
Yeah.
right.
That's so cool. I'm going to
Okay.
play that after this. So you can shift the whole scale up a semitone.
Yeah.
Cool.
Without it doesn't change the music at all. It just changes the synth that plays back as the player plays. So
It's now possible to...
Yeah, you can play chromatically if you want to.
Right.
Cool, because I was thinking it would be really nice to be able to play the blues scale over this piece because it works really well, like shifting between mixed melody and
Yeah, that'd be interesting. The thing was that it was effectively a one-button game, so you held the button down and it played notes, and because it was focused on mouse, like we needed to work with mouse, we didn't want to deal with like right-click and anything like that. So there was really only one thing that the button was just play music, yes or no. So anything else was like a bonus. But I do like that scale changing idea. I think I have
also
a few spare
maybe-
buttons on the controller. I'm not sure. It might be fun to do.
I was thinking it would be cool to allow the player to quantize notes sometimes. And then you could do like a kind of scale run that's like in time with the music.
Right.
But I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure how fun that would be, but
It'd be
stuff
tricky
like
to,
that could
to
be cool.
do.
Check it out for next time.
Due to how the system works, it'd be kind of difficult to add that. But I like the idea.
Should we talk a little bit how we kind of came upon the instrument sound? Because I remember we tried out a few different.
God, yeah. I mean, it was basically the only good option. I'm still not super pleased with it, but the only other option is like a physical modeling saxophone, which, I mean, God, it probably cost a lot of money to license the only good one that exists out there in the market.
Yeah.
And coding our own is just like beyond. Yeah, I mean, again, it's a thing that has to be fun for 5 minutes. We tried sound fonts, we tried samples.
Yeah.
The issue
We were
is,
keen on granular synthesis as well.
the issue was slurs between notes. Like, because it so much encourages fast runs, having that attack each time the note is triggered in a sample is really detrimental. It just sounds super cheesy. But you can in a synthesized sound.
I think the sample route is probably the most doable because there's a lot of like contact instruments where they've done kind of legato transitions in between all the notes. It's a lot of work to get it sounding good, but I think it's still easier than like making a physical modeling sound good, I think.
Right. Yeah, you one thing I remember looking at, like I looked at a lot of reactor instruments that did physical modeling for winds, and there was a really good flute one where you could like overblow it, which sounded really cool. Because one of the things we wanted to communicate was that you started off being a kind of janky player. So like at the beginning of the interaction, the synth is like super wobbly and there's a lot of delay on it and it feels super drunk. And the delay time is just wobbling back and forth with an LFO. So like the pitch in the background is always changing. And you don't get like a pure tone until later. So I kind of use that as an excuse for the synthesizer. In that it's supposed to sound spacey and weird. But the funny thing is that during QA, we did get like 2 times the QA person sent back, "This doesn't sound like a saxophone." I'm like, yeah, I know. But I thought that was really fun.
Oh, right. Well, I thought we were very keen to make it sound like a saxophone at first because it was in the previous interaction.
I knew.
But then the problem is, if you're in between synth and real life, lovely sounding sax, that's when I thought that problem would come up, where people are like, this sounds different.
Right. So I just made it sound entirely synthesized.
Yeah, I thought that they'd then go, okay, we're going into synth territory now. I'm not complaining that it doesn't sound like a saxophone.
Right. Well, it's because the player, in that interaction at the beginning where it's the piano roll in the time stream effect, the character's holding a saxophone, and you can see it. So that's what they said. It's like, hey, it looks like I'm playing a saxophone, but it doesn't sound like one.
Oh, I forgot that.
Yeah, in the bit where it's just the city builder, like it's just the buildings coming down. I think it's and also I think it may have got removed because of some bug, but I think we had some kind of sound of like bricks.
Yeah, it's in there, but it's very quiet.
And that kind of adding that texture seemed to like help, like make it feel like it was part of the world, I thought. And then the musician's response to the player. Could you just describe a little bit about how that related to the kind of splines that are kind of...
Yeah, so because the notes that you're playing are directly, they're points in space, just due to how the interaction works, where the y-axis is pitch, and then you just kind of draw a line through space. That inherently means that I can cut up that line and move that line around. So if I like take a segment of that line that the player's drawn and just move it up, then suddenly the pitch goes up for the entire line. Or I rotate it or flip it upside down, then the rhythm is maintained, but the tone changes a bit, the notes in various ways. It's not super clear, but I think having that rhythm is the most important thing. And speed, because if you do, that's what really sold it for me, I think, was even if the notes are different, and they're only made different by scaling, by making the entire path, so the pitch intervals would get bigger, or by rotating, which, I mean, if you imagine rotating a bunch of notes that are in 3D space, it doesn't really, there's no intuitive way of really understanding what that sounds like. But it's an easy way of getting a change while still maintaining that rhythm and that pacing. So the player does a really quick line, then the human saxophonist will do another quick line. So getting that kind of timing was super important and super easy with how the system was built. Just by nature, I mean, that was before we even had that idea. I mean, it was just how I built the saxophone, like the brush interaction was just a path automatically.
Okay.
So it was easy to just take that and say, oh, well, now we can use that as an AI effectively for recreating or for replying to what the player's doing.
That's definitely my favorite bit of the level, when you kind of realize that it's playing back to you, but it's slightly different because it's just taking these chunks and then moving them around.
It took a lot of tuning to be like, okay, well, how long of a chunk is it going to take? How far back in time does it look? Because if you're playing like a really long section, then it would sound weird if the musician, if a human musician replies with something from like 30 seconds ago, you wouldn't remember what you played. So I think he only looks back like in the past 5 seconds. And because the notes were so easy to change, it doesn't feel like he's just parroting so much.
Yeah, so if anyone's watching this talk and interested in hearing more, Jeremy did a really amazing deep dive on this in his GDC talk. So is that accessible to everyone?
I'm not sure.
Can you buy like talk by talk?
No, you have to buy the vault, the GDC vault, which is like thousands of dollars. I don't know if they put the talk in the free section.
Cool. And we also wanted to mention the DLC, which is coming out
So yeah, so right now the game is on sale on Steam for 45% off. There's new free DLC content you can check out right now.
Cool. And the DLC is quite significant, right? It's extra levels.
It's about probably like 20 to 30 minutes, maybe.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's like a little side story.
Yeah.
That
worth checking out, in my opinion.
It's definitely a chunk of good stuff.
There's some fun stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not just like a new hat.
No.
Character.
It's more story.
Yeah. Thanks for talking to us, guys.
No problem. Thank you for having us.
As always, it's amazing collaborating with you guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Super grateful that we got to make something pretty special with you.
That's exactly how we feel. We're very lucky.
Great.
Thank you. Cheers.
So we talked about how we can set up computer systems so that the player can improvise. But now we want to talk about how we managed to inject an improvised performance into the music tracks. And that involves a few different challenges, actually. Getting a jazzy, loose feel into any synchronized project, like a film or something like that, can be challenging anyway, because ideally you would have all instrumentalists in the same room, like playing off of each other, but we didn't have that luxury because, for one thing, budget. It's quite expensive to set up a room with all those microphones and, get around scheduling and have a big enough studio and stuff on the budget we had. And another thing is how bitty a game is. We were working on sometimes 15-second bits and bobs of music to equal, hours of audio in total. So we needed to have a saxophonist in for some parts and not the drummer for other parts and stuff like that. So basically we just had to get everyone in separately, record one layer, and then get someone else and record the other layer, and hope that they can sort of jive from the vibe of a different performer's recording. As I mentioned, the sheer volume of what we're recording makes it very difficult. Here's what we called our recording tracker, which is a spreadsheet we made to keep track of, to make sure we'd recorded every single tiny little cue that we needed. Some of them, you can see there's a minutes and seconds thing, and there's a 15-second one in the top right, and some of them are 5 minutes long and stuff like that.
Do you remember how many items we had on that list? Something crazy, 500.
I think it was
sections.
Actually more like half that. If I skip to the end of this little screen recording I made, we can see 256. That's the main band, but then on top of that we had a full orchestra, and then we had our own recordings, because this is the main instrumentalist, guitar, bass, drums, not guitar, but drums, bass, saxophone, trumpet, piano. And then we recorded our own little bits of percussion and stuff like that on top. And vocals too. I don't think vocals are in this. Anyway, so maybe it was 500 bits, And for partly for that reason, a lot of what we did had to be very carefully planned. Other reasons are we needed to, when you're synchronizing to cutscenes and stuff like that, there are very specific moments you need to hit, and there's no way anyone can be improvising and then suddenly hit all the right stuff. So here, this demonstrates one of our lead sheets, they call it. This is the jazz word for scores, basically, where we've presented this to, I think, the drummer in this case, and said, play this, please, without too much space for embellishment and improv and stuff like that. But then other pieces where we had that space, we left as much space as possible for the instrumentalist. We knew we spent a great deal of time getting some fantastic instrumentalists together, so we didn't want to go in there and and like hold them down to our scores. They would do something they would breathe so much more life into it than we could by like programming all the MIDI beforehand and then just getting them to ape that. So you see here, we've got very basic information of what we absolutely needed, like the motifs that you hear in the game that we want to be heard to tell the story. But around that, they can really inject a lot of their own flavor.
Yeah, when recording, we would often kind of do a tune pass where we would get them to play the melody on the lead sheet, which is normally like a character theme or something that we've been very specific in our composition. But then we would also get them to do another take where they would just improvise over the chords, and we would get so much great stuff that way.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes we'd be very specific about the scale that we really wanted them to play, like the one
musical scale, that is.
Yeah, or the mode.
But then our directions would sometimes get very abstract as well, because we wanted them to find solutions to, add something extra. So we wouldn't say, listen to this song by Miles Davis. It's that we want, and we want to go up these many steps or whatever musically. We would say, that was great, but think more triangular or something, like that. And then try and feel what we're talking about and then do something. And we'd be like, really, 9 times out of 10, we'd just be overjoyed with what they did.
Yeah. Our direction varied from being really highly specific to like extremely abstract, because some of the themes in the game were like to do with science and thinking about the golden ratio and stuff like that. So I remember you giving the drummer like a really specific, you want him to play pi or something like that. Was it pi or was it
I think it was Fibonacci sequence. Because that's related to the spiral of Golden Boy. And yeah, so we literally just gave him a number and then saw what he came up with. I'm not sure it really made it into the game, actually.
No, I don't think it worked out, but it was fun to try.
So that's a bad example, but they enjoyed those challenges.
Yeah.
This is like a filtered section of the recording tracker we mentioned earlier. This is just the drums, and we bring this up to demonstrate like the ratio of how much we want. As you can see here, it says replace, replace, replace in this roll column. That's where we wanted Salim, our drummer, to play exactly what we had programmed. Basically, we'd play it to him, and it would go, and he had to go, and then we've got embellish as a direction. So he's playing basically what we've got in MIDI, but then jazzing it up a bit. And then there are moments where pure improv, in category freak out here, you can see. So that was basically him just going, blah, 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 and we couldn't possibly have programmed that. That's Salim in the studio. We could play a little video, but let's march on. Oh, here is a little video. Time having a little warm up. Fantastic guy. So what happened with this track TikTok, which we're using as an example of how we harnessed improvisation, is we were working with Salim, recording with Salim, and then we had, 20 minutes left over at the end. And when you've got a fantastic musician in the studio, you don't chill for 20 minutes. You say,
Yeah.
just do something. And we literally said that. I think we gave him a click and said, play a beat. We were keen to get more like upbeat stuff because the game's actually quite solemn, and we didn't have much, like bebop, quick jazz.
Yeah, we didn't actually compose anything that fast, just because everything is a very slow, meditative puzzle game. So I think we just asked Salim, like, come up with some stuff, and he had to think about what kind of beats we didn't already have, and that's why he started playing this like fast, like kind of fast swing beat, which we really loved, and we really wanted to find somewhere for it in the game.
Yeah. We'll play that in a minute. Actually, I'll play it right now. Here we have. This is where it all started. This track up the top. It was just, we called it bonus beats, and these were 3 things that he played. Just this lovely thing, and then this one, and that actually made it into the game in the first level when you're chasing the thief who tries to pay for a watch with pants. Spoiler alert. And then this beat, and we were like, yeah, digging it. So what we did is we took a motif, like a bass motif, and boom, 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 and then there's rising horns. From the first thing we actually ever wrote for Genesis Noir, and it was this teaser. You can hear it has so much less life in it than after the musicians started recording. So yeah, we added this bass and the piano from that original thing, and then we programmed. Oh, not that yet. And it fit really well. So we thought we'd continue it and added. Just before a session, we thought we need a little bit more music to base this on, rather than just twiddling, and we came up with it very quickly. It was actually when we were listening to a couple of tracks that we won't play for copyright reasons, but Thelonious Monk's Dream, Take 3. I can't remember how it goes actually, but it basically just goes like, it just had a quick biddle-dit. And we thought we need some music and quickly put on a bit of Thelonious Monk and thought, yeah, let's do something a bit biddle-dit. And I think Sun Ra's Tiny Pyramids was involved as well, because it's got that kind of Eastern scale, that feeling that is in the final thing. But I don't remember if actually that was an influence, but maybe it was indirectly. So then we had our saxophonist Josh come in. Oh, it's out of sequence. Oh, I'm playing the wrong bits. This is him replacing what we did. And then my next point was going to be we left these big chunks for him to just improv over the top. And he had never heard this before, so as you can hear, it doesn't quite click all the time, because that was all new to him. Here's some footage of Josh going nuts in our old studio. Oh, that's actually for a different piece. And here we see the final track. As you can see, the drums have been extended to a full-length song, and you can see there's a lot of edit points here. Let's see how they sound. You can hear like tempo changes over the edits in places. Not there, I don't think. Very slightly. Because we had to chop it up and stuff. And then we had live bass. I think this was actually taken from a different recording entirely. The other one that has the same motif. Because look how cut up it is. I don't quite remember, do you?
I can't remember at all.
Anyway, sounds great. It's actually a MIDI piano. And then there's that sax back in. Now that we've taken the improv recordings and chopped them up and made something a bit sensible with it. And then, what did we add next? I think that's the central band, and then we came in and we put a shaker on and a tambourine. And I guess that's it, we've got ourselves a track. We did actually try some vocals as well, but we struggled to find more perfect lyrics than what we started with, which was about scooping up poop. It was just like scratch lyrics, and they sounded amazing. Nothing more relevant could actually ever sound so good, so we just snipped them out entirely. So now I guess we'll just play the entire song, so you can hear how lively and improv-y it actually sounds. And there it is. You would never know that they weren't all in the same room. I hope.
Cool. Thanks very much for watching our talk. We're going to be around in the chat box to answer anyone's questions if you have any.
And if you want to hear more, you could play the game, which is available on Steam, Xbox, Switch, and you could grab the album itself from our Bandcamp page, skillbard.bandcamp.com. Thanks very much.